They say death is the end, a final closing of the book. But what if the book stays open? What if the soul is trapped in a decaying cage, screaming to be released, but held back by madness? Or worse, by science? Tonight we dive into two of the most disturbing accounts ever recorded by the master of the macabre, Edgar Allan Poe. These aren't just stories. They are nightmares that have bled into reality for over a century. Lock your doors, dim the lights, because after this, you won't want to be alone in the dark. Our first descent takes us to the house of Usher. Not just a building, but a living, breathing entity of sorrow. I remember the day I arrived. It was a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens. I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy house of Usher. I looked upon the scene before me, upon the mere house and the simple landscape features of the domain, upon the bleak walls, upon the vacant eye-like windows, upon a few rank sedges, and upon a few white trunks of decayed trees, with an utter depression of soul. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart. My childhood friend, Roderick Usher, had summoned me. His letter spoke of a nervous agitation, a mental disorder that oppressed him. But when I entered those walls and saw him, I barely recognized the man. He was a cadaver, his skin translucent, his hair thin and wild, his eyes glowing with an unholy light. Roderick wasn't just sick, he was terrified. He believed the house itself was alive, fueled by the atmosphere of the decaying trees and the silent black water of the tarn that lay just outside the walls. And then, there was Madeline, his twin sister. The Lady Madeline passed through the distant part of the room and disappeared without a word, leaving me with a feeling of inexplicable dread. A few days later, Roderick informed me that she was no more. To prevent the doctors from examining her body, he asked me to help him entomb her in the deep vaults beneath the mansion. We carried her in her copper coffin down the narrow, winding stone stairs. The walls were dripping with moisture, the air was thick and stale. As we looked at her face one last time before bolting the iron door, I noticed a faint blush on her cheeks and a lingering smile. We locked her away in the dark, and for a few days a bitter silence settled over the house. But the silence was a lie. 7 days later, a storm unlike any other hit the region. The air turned electric, and the house seemed to tremble under the weight of the wind. Roderick entered my room, his eyes wide with madness, pacing the floor with a rhythmic, frantic step. To calm him, I began to read an old volume, but as I read, the sounds from the pages began to echo through the halls. A cracking wood, a screaming sound, the grating of heavy iron. Roderick suddenly turned his chair to face the door and began to rock from side to side. "I heard it!" he finally shrieked. "Many days ago I heard it, yet I dared not speak. We have put her living in the tomb. I tell you that she now stands without the door." In that instant, the huge antique panels of the door threw slowly back their ivory jaws. There stood the lofty and enshrouded figure of the Lady Madeline of Usher. There was blood upon her white robes and the evidence of some bitter struggle upon every portion of her emaciated frame. For a moment she remained trembling and reeling to and fro upon the threshold, then with a low moaning cry fell heavily inward upon her brother, and in her violent and now final death agonies bore him to the floor a corpse and a victim to the terrors he had anticipated. I fled from that chamber and from that mansion, aghast. The storm was still abroad in all its wrath as I found myself crossing the old causeway. Suddenly there shot a fierce light along the path, and I turned to see whence a gleam so unusual could have issued. The light was that of the full, setting, and blood-red moon, which now shone vividly through that once barely discernible crack in the wall. Even as I gazed, the crack widened. There came a fierce blast of the whirlwind, and my brain reeled as I saw the mighty walls rushing asunder. There was a long, tumultuous shouting sound like the voice of 1,000 waters, and the deep and dank tarn at my feet closed sullenly and silently over the fragments of the House of Usher. If that story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We are building a community here for those who aren't afraid of the shadows, and your support helps us bring more of these nightmares to life. But don't get too comfortable. because our second story tonight explores a horror that even the grave couldn't contain. In our second account, we look at the boundaries of science. For years, I had been obsessed with mesmerism, the art of hypnosis. I wanted to know, could a person be hypnotized at the very moment of death? Could the soul be held in the body by the sheer force of a human will? My friend, Monsieur Valdemar, was dying of phthisis. He was a man of high nervous susceptibility and agreed to be my subject. As his final hour approached, his pulse became nearly imperceptible. His extremities were cold. I began the passes of my hand across his forehead, focusing every ounce of my energy into his fading consciousness. "Monsieur Valdemar, are you asleep?" I whispered. He didn't answer at first. I repeated it. Finally, a whisper came from his motionless lips. "I am asleep. Do not wake me. I am dying." The doctors checked his heart. There was no pulse, no breath. For all intents and purposes, he was dead, but the trance held. He remained in this state for 7 months. He didn't rot. He didn't move. He was a living corpse, a waxen statue preserved by the power of mesmerism. We visited him daily, watching as the dust settled on his unmoving frame. But the horror truly began when we decided we could no longer keep him in this state. We had to wake him. I began the reverse passes to break the trance. I asked him once more, "Monsieur Valdemar, can you explain your feelings?" His jaw dropped open, revealing a black, swollen tongue. His eyes began to leak a yellow ichor. And then a voice came. It didn't come from his throat. It felt as if it vibrated from the very air around us, bubbling and distorted. He screamed, "For God's sake, quick, quick, put me to sleep, or quick, waken me, quick! I say to you that I am dead." As I frantically tried to complete the awakening, his whole body, within the space of a single minute, shrunk, crumbled, absolutely rotted away beneath my hands. There was nothing left upon the bed but a loathsome heap of detestable decay. Science had succeeded in holding back the soul, but in doing so, it had created a nightmare beyond human comprehension. 2 houses, 2 endings, one destroyed by the weight of its own history, the other by the arrogance of man. Poe warned us that some doors are never meant to be opened. Which of these endings disturbed you more? The fall of the mansion or the liquefaction of Monsieur Valdemar? Let me know in the comments below, and remember, some things are better left in the dark. Good night.